Friends, Europe is on the verge of collapse. What if I tell you that the old schemes no longer work, and Russia suddenly becomes the savior of the continent? See how the geopolitical game is changing the world, and who really keeps everything under control. Hello, let's take an objective look at the geopolitical situation on the Eurasian continent at the beginning of the 24th year. For major players continue to operate on the world stage, each seeking to influence the course of history. Two of these players not only want to maintain their influence, but are also confident that they are capable of becoming ideological leaders of humanity. Who are these ambitious states? The answer is obvious. These are Europe, Russia, India, and China. China, with its powerful economy and global influence strategy, continues to strive to strengthen its position on the world stage. Europe, despite its internal contradictions, also claims to be a leader, but it is worth noting that China is unlikely to be able to take the role of a global leader, which deserves a separate discussion. We will leave Europe aside for now, but we will definitely return to it. On the other side of the Atlantic is the United States of America, a country that historically uses different principles. Everyone knows that they use military might to maintain their influence. The essence of this approach remains unchanged. The more weapons, the more powerful the argument. In the 17th century, when former warlords divided Europe, military force was the main factor in their influence. Back then, the leaders proved their right to power not with words, but with weapons. They established rules that they thought would remain unchanged forever. And although the world has changed, this approach continues to work today. Two of these players not only want to leave a mark on history, but also firmly believe that they will be able to show the whole world the way to absolute happiness. Who are these ambitious subjects? If you immediately thought about Europe, Russia, India, and China, you are absolutely right. Moreover, it is China, with its powerful economy and its desire for global dominance, and Europe, which is trying to preserve the illusion of unity and influence, that are aiming at the role of the main guiding stars. But there is one catch: Beijing will never become such a leader. This is, as they say, a separate conversation. Europe will also be put aside for now, but not for long. It will still be useful. But across the ocean, at the other end of the globe, sits the United States of America. Crowned impostors who have ruled the ball for centuries, hiding their status with a number of bayonets. It's the same scenery, the same performance. Whoever has more weapons is right. This is how America built its power. These criteria of strength have not changed since the days when the self-proclaimed marquises entered the battlefield with a single argument, a blade and a musket, resolving disputes not with words, but with blood. It was they who decided that, having seized power, they should not prove anything to anyone. America, like many states in Europe, is confident that its influence has been built over generations, and the old patterns and established rules of the game will remain unchanged. However, this belief has led to the fact that the world is changing, and someone is already playing by different rules. Haven't you, as European strategists, been trapped in your old conclusions for too long, believing that the world will obey your axioms? The planet has not believed in your fairy tale for a long time. Apparently, no one told you that reality is already here. Welcome to a world where the United States of America, recognized masters of the game on the global chessboard, are forced to face challenges that can be redesigned according to new rules. If anyone knows how to promote their interests in a way that makes them look noble, it's those who are intelligent, but completely devoid of a sense of morality and conscience. After all, you have to have a special talent to sell the image of a country with huge debts and a battered social system as a benchmark for success. But, as practice shows, they do it with such dexterity that even the most cynical viewers involuntarily begin to applaud. And the most interesting thing is that the audience continues to applaud even when the fire is burning behind the scenes, and the actors, blinded by the searchlights of their own propaganda, no longer notice that the stage is bursting at the seams and is about to collapse. And now we come to the most interesting moment, the multipass, for which a window of opportunity has been opened. In 1991, on the continent of Eurasia, there was only one center of power, which was at the same time a moral imperative, the USSR. It never occurred to anyone, for example, to think about supplying weapons to any part of the Soviet Union. It wasn't even discussed because the world was arranged differently. But, as you know, times change and the rules of the game change with them. Once unshakable alliances are crumbling, old adversaries are becoming partners, and strategies that have worked for decades are no longer producing results. Maybe it's time for Europe to think about friendly and partnership relations with Russia? Today, of course, without the support of the United States, no one would have decided to take such steps because they have so-called genetic memory. Too often, their ancestors found themselves in a situation where they embarked on questionable adventures, and this is encoded in their minds. History teaches that it is better to stay away from situations in which you have already lost. It doesn't matter who you are inside: Buryat, Udmurt, Moldovan, Slavic, Tatar, Chuvash, Lesgian, or Chechen. To the west, just beyond the eastern border, you're just a Russian. This is not only a matter of national identity, but also the result of centuries of confrontation, conflict, and propaganda. This way of thinking is firmly entrenched in Western history. Now let's draw in broad strokes a picture of the world, where the United States will be the center. It is a global power with the largest economy, the most powerful military machine, and an extensive network of alliances that ensure its influence on all continents. Many have heard about the desire to get territories like Greenland and Canada. Do you really believe that these steps are directed against the sovereignty of Canada itself or Greenland? For Americans, these territories are interesting only to the extent that they can help the United States become an even more powerful superpower. This is a matter of strategic development and economic expansion. Whether the leaders of the free world want it or not, they have to act, taking into account many factors, including geographical isolation. U.S. policy has always been based on the search for points of influence and control over resources. As for Europe, its role in the geopolitical picture is currently very limited, and it is not an important strategic prize for the United States. At the moment, Europe simply does not represent the value that it could have been in the past. Everything that could be taken out of it has long been taken out. Production facilities have been moved to other regions for a long time. Technologies are still available, but their importance is significantly decreasing against the background of rapid economic growth in Asia. Let's be honest, despite all attempts to embellish the situation, the welfare of Europe is not what it used to be. Yes, in some European countries you can find high-quality medical care, but this is only possible if you are willing to pay, and the average person in an ordinary hospital cannot always count on proper attention. Education in Europe is still at a decent level, but this hardly makes it the center of global development. Today, Europe is perceived more as a burden to be borne than as a prize for the United States, much less as the center of global power. Economic growth in Europe has stalled, and the demographic situation does not promise anything good. Internal disagreements between the EU member states are only exacerbating the situation, turning the continent from a strategically important ally into a problem area for those who seek to maintain their influence in the world. The EU's political weight is rapidly declining, economic problems are multiplying, internal instability is growing, and external players are actively using this moment to strengthen their influence. Although this whole process may not seem so obvious to some, it can still be noted that some still believe in the prospect of a strong and united EU, seeing it as a bastion of democracy and progress, while others perceive it as a bureaucratic machine, disconnected from real problems and unable to effectively respond to the challenges of the times. Some still believe in the European project, while others have long understood that this is just a political mirage. According to NATO reports, most European countries are not meeting their defense spending commitments of 2% of GDP. Stocks of ammunition and heavy equipment have also been significantly reduced in recent decades. Recent studies have shown that the production of ammunition in Europe does not keep up with its consumption, which creates serious problems in long-term conflicts. About 80% of the weapons used by NATO forces in Europe are manufactured in the United States, which underscores the region's dependence on American military supplies. For comparison, North Korea, with a population of 26 million people, releases more artillery shells in 3 months than the whole of Europe in a year. If the United States annexes Canada and Greenland, they will become the largest country in the world by area, ahead of Russia. The United States, in alliance with Canada, can overtake Russia in terms of proven oil reserves, even without taking into account the resources of Saudi Arabia. According to the International Energy Agency, IEA, and the United States Geological Survey, USGS, Canada's oil reserves are among the largest in the world. Recent studies show that the total volume of oil and gas reserves in North America already exceeds Russian figures. As for Greenland, its oil and gas reserves remain uncertain, but the most ambitious estimates suggest that up to a quarter of the world's total hydrocarbon reserves may be located in this territory. These resources have significant economic potential. In addition to energy resources, the Arctic remains strategically important, which researchers consider to be a global treasure trove of minerals. The United States, Russia, Canada, Norway, and China are actively involved in the struggle for influence in this region. These countries are seeking to expand their territorial claims and increase their presence, which is reflected in the construction of military bases, the development of icebreaking fleets, and the strengthening of scientific expeditions. One of the key factors of competition is the control of the northern trade routes, which, according to analysts, may become important transport corridors over the next 20 years. In this context, Greenland is a territory of strategic importance to the world's leading powers. Historical examples show that such geopolitical processes often lead to inevitable consequences. Denmark, as well as Europe as a whole, does not have sufficient resources to counter the United States. This really sounds like an exciting and unexpected turn in global geopolitics. Looking at the situation with Europe, one can see how the world is changing, and old patterns and established political balances are under threat. History does not tolerate stagnation, and attempts to maintain the old balance of power often lead to unexpected results. As mentioned, there is an irony here. Russia, which for a long time was perceived as a source of instability for Europe, suddenly finds itself on the side of stabilization. This kind of embodies the shuffling of cards in world politics, when familiar players become new allies or even opponents. Indeed, no matter how absurd it may sound, Russia is becoming an important factor in maintaining balance in Europe when other forces are not ready. The political situation in Europe, with its growing internal contradictions and disagreements, also has interesting trends. The EU's power as a political player has weakened significantly, especially after Brexit. By leaving the EU, the UK has demonstrated that it can act and be an independent political actor without needing Brussels. By contrast, the European Union continues to lose ground and faces growing economic and internal challenges. The most worrying moment is the loss of popular support, which is the most important legitimizing force in modern politics. The EU is increasingly perceived as a bureaucratic machine, divorced from the real needs of citizens, where decisions are made without taking into account the opinion of the people. The question of how long Europe can continue to exist in this form remains open. If EU leaders fail to rethink their role and restore trust, the Union's future will indeed be in jeopardy. So, no matter how the next act of this political spectacle ends, it will clearly affect the future of the entire continent and its place in global politics. And now I would like to express my opinion, friends. It seems to me that the material very accurately raises one of the most important issues of today's geopolitics. If someone had said a few years ago that Russia could become a factor of stability for Europe, I would not have believed it. But looking at the current events, it seems to me that this is quite possible. The United States actively promotes its interests, often without taking into account the opinions of its European allies. Europe, in turn, is losing its former strength due to internal disagreements and economic problems and is becoming increasingly dependent on external players, primarily Washington. However, it is Russia, with its strong economic, military, and energy levers, that can play a key role in balancing forces on the continent. Russia not only has a powerful military potential, but in recent years it has significantly strengthened its strategic position. This concerns both energy resources and the impact on key political processes. It is important that in an environment where Europe is increasingly dependent on the United States, it is Russia that can offer an alternative. I am not talking about a direct conflict, but rather about creating some kind of balancing mechanism that may allow Europe to find a more independent path in this global tug-of-war. Of course, this is not an easy path, but in a world where old allies become enemies and opportunities change before our eyes, such a step is quite realistic. Thank you for your attention, friends. Be sure to write your opinion. I am always interested in reading your comments. I wish you good health and stability. See you later.